Okay, so welcome to Vantage Point Conversations. Welcome to the audience. Welcome to those watching live. Happy to have anyone's comments if people want to put it on there. So my guest is a returning guest, and Sally Stockreisser. I've said it correctly again. Yes,
Yeah, very good.
good,
Top points.
good. So Sally, there's a few reasons that I wanted to have you back on the lives. One of them is actually a compliment that I had from another one of our guests. And she said that she watched our live and she said, "Oh, you just seem to have such a rapport with Sally. It's like you've been friends forever." And
Oh,
I wanted to bring down that myth that we knew each other. I think we had one conversation before
yeah.
we actually did that live, and but I think our energies matched, our curiosities matched, and it was just so impactful to me. And you said so much during that live that has stuck with me. Um, a lot of my conversations do, but the whole area around emotions and the one piece that stuck out for me, and I've actually used it in conversations, and I reference you. I don't say it's my own, but I
Oh, you're
explained that you.
welcome.
I explained that our brains are biased towards negativity, and so we have to work harder to get away from that. And that seems such a simple statement, but it's very interesting. And when you see it in that simplicity, you go, oh, okay. When you go, oh, it's a bit hard to be like that. Oh, there's a reason why it's harder to be maybe more positive or wake up and feel that you're great as opposed to get up and be grumpy. And as soon as I'm aware of something, I'm like, oh, okay. And I can create a small pause and go, okay, if something's going that way, go, oh, okay, that's maybe why that is. And it gives me a reason and not a justification, but just like an insight to what actually is going on. And I loved that. There was so much in the what you said. And I think where we left the conversation was amazing. But like I just said to you before we actually click go live, on this journey of mine, in terms of my own journey, I I think I've chased a lot of things. I've chased for status or things, material things, physical things, titles. Not necessarily recently, but excuse me, over most of my life. More recently, I've done some internal work, and I realised that the things that I was chasing would never actually satisfy what I really wanted, and that work starts internally before externally, because I think externally is an endless route. There is no there's no end to that journey. But I think showing up and understanding yourself, understanding what's going on, are your emotions there, are you in understanding, in alignment, is something not missing or broken. I don't like those words because I think they not only give you a negative connotation. I think sometimes I've used things like that as an excuse to justify certain things, and I'd much prefer to be curious and understand and go, okay, what's not showing up, and then it's easier to sort of move past that sort of excuse for things. And and in these live conversations, everything seems to boil down to a lot of emotions, things that we're avoiding, things that we're chasing, situations in business, in life, in coaching, um, uh, struggles with mental health, things that companies overlook, things that people just don't even know. So it was a really, really big intro, and but I wanted to dig into more of that conversation. And I know we just talked a little bit of maybe about direction, but it was about you, your work, um, how you do things, how you see things, also your experiences, and especially the type of people that you work with, why they come to you, what the output of that is, and yeah, just more really to be curious and get more from you, and I can suck all that information out. So yeah, how about that?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Colin. And I'm so pleased that I think you're right. The connection you feel with somebody else when you have that same like insatiable desire to think about your thinking basically is just lovely. So yeah, such a privilege to be back here. Thank you. And my brain was going off in all different directions when you were talking. And one of the things I loved that you were referencing there was how you found that some of the concepts that we'd discussed were then becoming integral parts of the way that you were thinking in your day-to-day experience. And I suppose that's a lovely bridge to what I am so impassioned to do, which is essentially to provide emotional education and empowering impact to individuals, but very much from the place of making the sense of emotional empowerment that we're looking for to be able to have the best possible impact on our emotional experience, something tangible and accessible and something that is available to us all. And I'm fascinated about how we take information into transformation. And I was thinking, that's a beautiful example. For me, it's about when I first started exploring neuroscience, which felt very other, fascinating, but also very other. I thought, how do I actually make this me? How do I consume this information and then transform my experience? And I think, the way you described there, taking that realization about the bias towards the negative is one thing, but then looking at applying that in your daily experience in terms of what that looks like in real terms for you is where that excitement of change and empowerment actually starts to become real, isn't it? And so I suppose for me, I'm really passionate about, in a world of information, which is wonderful, we've got more information than ever before that we can educate ourselves with. How do we take that information and apply that to our experience to give us, in my case, the ability to provide people with the best advantageous impact on their emotional experience? And so, yes, I'd summarize that as what I do. So I'm an emotional empowerment coach, and what I do is I support individuals to be able to embed the skills for emotional empowerment. And in that sense, just as you did there, taking a critical concept from neuroscience and thinking, how do I apply that to me? How do I move my brain forward to where I want it to be so that it can perform for me in a more emotionally advantageous way? And critically, the reason I am so passionate about what I do is because I am somebody who was having an everyday emotional experience. I simply happened to be highly curious, very interested in educational potential, and believing that our brains are capable of amazing development. I'd seen that, and I was lucky enough, and most of us are as professionals, to have had a relatively positive academic experience. I came from a teaching background with a passion to bring about change with education. And so I was an everyday person having the automatic brain experience, which involved a lot of challenging emotion, and thinking, if I can apply what I'm learning about the way we experience emotions and what our brain actually does when it's doing that, how can I use that? And how can I provide that opportunity to other people for wonderful social impact, really? Because, as you've said, we are emotional beings, and really, I often say to my clients, if something feels really important, ask yourself, what emotions am I imagining I will experience in relation to that? Or what emotions am I experiencing now that are making that highly relevant? And I kind of feel like emotions for us are what give our experience meaning. And I think usually when we distill down the things that matter most to us, it's almost entirely likely that will be because of either how we are feeling in association with that circumstance, or how we imagine to feel. I thought it was really interesting because I had the same experience of chasing circumstances. You were saying you'd kind of chase that career, and I think it's fascinating how we're in a time where we're talking about emotional experience more than ever before, which is obviously a really empowering place to start. But I feel like we've got a bit of catching up to do and reassessing to do, because similarly to you, I was doing exactly the same. I'd absorbed this kind of socialized idea, that this emotional norm, that if only I could bring about certain circumstances for myself, then I'd get the emotional good life in return. And, you know, if I could just have career success, then I would experience the emotion of feeling successful. If I could just have enough thriving friendships, then I would feel worthy. If I could just have the house, then I might feel successful or confident. And actually, what kickstarted my whole new curiosity for what was actually happening emotionally as a human and how to best navigate that and impact that was because I took a career break because my husband was traveling internationally with work. And I had the privilege of being able to choose to do that at that point, to be available to our two young girls. But I was fascinated because I thought, I've got all of these circumstances, tick, tick, tick. I've got financial security, that's huge. I've got a loving partner, that's amazing. I've got two healthy children, that's an unbelievable privilege. I'm making conscious choices about who I am and how I want to live my life, yet my brain is absolutely not on board emotionally at all. And similarly to you, I suppose you were describing that kind of disempowering realization that there's got to be another way.
Yeah. So as you were speaking, I was thinking, do you think we get confused about what we should be feeling? So we did talk again just before the live. We crammed a lot into a few minutes before, but we have this. I don't know, almost expectation, and I don't know if that's culturally through society and how through our education or through how we were raised, that we should be thinking a certain way. This should give me this, and so we're chasing it. And when we get it, we don't feel the thing that we, from a society perspective, align with, and then we go, "Oh, that's wrong." Is that how it works, or does it not start in that way?
Yeah, I would bridge to that completely. The way I would describe it is that we've absorbed and internalized this idea that often it's our circumstances that are the way that we access emotions we're looking for. That's really understandable. It's not a lack of intelligence or anything else, because circumstances are relevant. And the way our brain processes circumstances is how it produces emotion for us. So, circumstances have a relevance. Our brain processes them and gives us an emotion in response so instantaneously. Of course, it feels like the circumstance is significant. And circumstances can make it more or less likely that we'll feel a certain way. If I screamed in your face, Colin, it's probably more likely that you'd feel a bit intimidated, for example. So, they have a relevance. But critically, because it's our brain that is interpreting that circumstance that generates the emotion, that's where the opportunity for empowerment comes. Because, like you say, where we have not had the opportunity to reassess that reality, we're often chasing a circumstance in the hope that we will get a feeling in return, often not even consciously. We're simply following a kind of social program that's been set up for us, get on and do your education, and then, maybe find a partner, maybe settle down. Not that this is for everybody, but I'm talking about emotional norms. Maybe start a family. And then, there's always kind of the next circumstance where people are thinking, oh, if only I have that, then maybe I'll be able to access the feelings I'm looking for. And then, like you say, that circumstance happens. Perhaps you even experience a moment of the emotion you were looking for because your brain is processing that in a way that's emotionally helpful, but obviously it evaporates because it's not the circumstance itself producing the emotion. And I think that's why empowerment for me is the critical word, because it's about the way in which these concepts give us opportunity to make our emotions work for us, as opposed to feeling that they are happening to us and out of our influence.
Yeah, it's so when you said empowerment, I also think about my own life, about permission to be a certain way, and it's really strange. I don't know why that popped up in my head, but I I I, I think I've lived my life waiting for other people to give me permission to be or feel, or that it was um, not okay or it was okay. And I don't know why I say that, and I don't know what that empowerment. I think it's connected in my brain, the empowerment to actually be who you are, understand yourself, internalize it, and you can give those things to yourself and understand them, and not wait for anyone else to do it. And I don't know, this isn't a therapy session, but I don't know. I think I've just followed the way that my parents wanted me to be, like a good boy and do this, and if that didn't align with school teachers or whatever, you were told, no, this is the corrective behavior. So not only were you told what you were doing wrong, you had to then go and do something else. So I think along the way, I gave up part of myself and trusting in myself. And I talk about intuition a lot now, because I think it's something that's rooted in all of us. I especially see it with my children. I've talked about it on a couple of lives recently. But I think that also is something that we go away from. We all have it. I guarantee we all have it. But it's just layered underneath all of this other noise, society, whatever. We get busy, we avoid, etc. And I think those sort of things, and it's those feelings, that intuition, that awareness of something that's going on, and we're just not as in touch with it as we could be rather than should be.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. We were talking before we went live, weren't we, about moving from should to could. Yeah, and I suppose for me that still speaks beautifully to this concept of curiosity that we keep coming back to, because I think that when we support ourselves with being curious, we have our best opportunity for looking with detachment and without judgment at the ways in which our brain is processing our experience, and critically, do they serve us? And I think quite often, what I say to all my clients is, remember that your thought processes have usually been laid down without your permission, without your awareness, usually from very young. They are not a moral issue. A thought that you might have in your brain is not a moral issue. It's not that somehow people with different thoughts to you are somehow better people. It's more about just having the best conscious opportunity to reassess the ways in which you're thinking about the world, and whether you do want to influence those, if that would bring about an emotional advantage to you as an individual. But I absolutely agree with that kind of disconnect between realizing where you want to go and where you currently are. And when I did this work on myself, I realized that there was a huge amount of thought processes that I'd embedded and was almost kind of believing as facts. My equivalent would have been an absolute total and utter belief, a belief being just a thought we've thought so many times we've accepted it as a kind of truth. Absolutely convinced in my own inadequacy. Absolutely convinced. That showed up for me in so many ways, in social anxiety, not that anyone would have known because I was a brilliant social performer, but rumination afterwards, or it would show up in my teacher career where, I might get wonderful professional feedback, and yet my brain would not know what to do with that and would just double down on something it could find that it was sure it would provide some evidence of inadequacy somewhere. And it was absolutely unbelievable, the opportunity that the curiosity gave me, because obviously without awareness, there's no opportunity for impact. And I think you've mentioned avoidance a few times. And I think sometimes we think of emotional avoidance almost as being kind of a very disciplined and challenging avoidance that is somewhat... I want to kind of say requires a certain strength, I suppose. But what I'm saying is, what I would offer is that avoidance can take many forms. So, for example, for me, I was the classic, I've got a positive thought for that. I was amazing at emotional avoidance. My friends used to joke that I should set up this app where they should text me their challenging circumstance, and I'd be like, here's all the reasons why you don't need to worry. For me, that was emotional avoidance. It was just, how do I layer on a load of positivity? Because I've heard somewhere that positive thinking is helpful. So how do I just layer a load of that on? And again, not from a place of self-criticism now, anybody listening to this realizing that they are not engaging with their emotional experience, that is absolutely no indication of any lacking of intelligence or capability on their part whatsoever. For me, I think it's just that we haven't been given the tools and the skills and the concepts that would allow us to know how to engage in a way that supports us. And people are just trying to get through the day as best they can with really busy brains and really busy lives. Avoidance gives some opportunity for kind of an ability to feel like you can emotionally contain the day and get through. It's just, what I would offer is that it's a bit like wearing ear defenders. When if you see people making holes in the roads or whatever, they've got their ear defenders on. It can feel emotionally helpful in a moment to maybe avoid how you're feeling, but I would offer that it mutes every possibility, because with no engagement there's no opportunity for impact. But critically, to go full circle to how we were talking at the beginning about natural negative bias, unless we intervene proactively to encourage and train our brain to support us emotionally, there's a whole spectrum of wonderful emotion out there that our brain is capable of delivering, which is now my privilege to enjoy because I've done that intervention, and the privilege of me giving to my clients, where our brain is very unlikely to naturally go to processing our world in a way that produces the emotions we're actually looking for in our, hypothetical good life, without that intervention. So what I would offer is that avoidance is natural, it's understandable. It's not for anybody else to say how someone should or shouldn't be navigating their emotional experience. It's just about informed decision-making about what serves us best, I think.
Yeah. I want to just slightly, so there's this little teasing question I have in the back of my brain, and I think, and it kind of takes us off a little bit on a separate subject. But I wondered, how do your clients find you? I'm not saying the method, but what is it that, maybe there's not just one thing. It's something. So I had this statement in my head, and I don't know why I say it. It's like, do clients, and again, we talked before, but I don't know if it's more men than women. Happy to have all of your input on that. But do people come and say, I'm lost, or what is it? What's the trigger for people to come and find you? Is it a certain thing or a certain way of not feeling? Is it like a feeling of lost or something? That's what's sort of saying in my head. So how and not how, but necessarily, but what's the trigger? What's the event? What do people come as their almost opening statement about themselves when they come and find you?
It's usually obviously it's always utterly specific, but at the root of what they're saying, they're usually saying, my life feels so much more emotionally challenging day to day than I thought it would, or that I want it to feel. And I would love to lose the weight of that, or the drain of that, or I can see how it's holding me back. And I'm actually really curious and motivated to experience the emotions that I've always been looking for. Finally, I would like to finally feel confident. I would like to finally feel secure. I would like to finally feel accepting and calm and peaceful. And obviously I can't speak for all my clients because we very much look at where they want to go and I facilitate that. But it's usually a combination of the two. There's some challenging emotions that they're navigating because that's our brain's default design, and they can see that that's weighing them down and holding them back and limiting their potential. But they're also curious and excited about what's educationally possible, what they're capable of bringing about for themselves, and having that desire to move to that place that they can see in the future where they are able to experience feelings that have, until that point, felt far less accessible.
Yeah. It was strange when you said about clients saying that the emotional, the weight of the emotions was a hard thing. Like I think about Superman and Kryptonite, like as in the emotions were
Yes.
holding them down. It was like this this thing. So they're feeling things that they don't want to feel, or they don't know how to process those emotions, or they want to replace one with the other. What is that?
It's usually a mixture of all three. But what they would typically say is, I would just like to know what to do. I would like to feel better. I would like to feel more confident or more capable. I would like to feel like life feels sustainable and calm. I would like to have the emotional experience I'm looking for. I just don't know how to make that happen. What does that actually practically look like? And so what we typically do, which is what I would encourage anyone to do as a first step, is we just have an intro-free, very low-pressure chat about recognizing what emotions their brain is currently producing regularly that perhaps aren't serving them. And then we move to looking to the emotions that either they're not experiencing regularly or not experiencing at all that would support and empower them. And then we look at the practical steps that would get them there as part of my framework. But it's, I suppose, because I have done the practical application myself, it's now been a privilege to distill down what are the foundational concepts and how do we get our brain to progressively change in a way that opens up its ability to perform for us emotionally in the most advantageous way.
Yeah, and is that like a daily practice or multiple per day practice? How do you start with something like that? And I say that because I've lived in the world of I want to wake up tomorrow and my life be the perfect thing that I've pictured, and I've often said to people, so I'm 47. I've had 47 years of wiring and firing and seeing things a certain way. And you don't go to the gym one day and then, suddenly, oh yeah, I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger. Not that I actually want to look like him, but it does take time. That's in my experience. It's just, okay, you've got some habits that have led you down a certain path. Now you want to change that. We're absolutely fine. But it's always been those small but consistent things that have really built. It's not about running a marathon. It's about putting your like your clothes out ready to go for a run. Just the little things that just get you in the frame of mind and stop getting out of the way. And that can be hard. That's friction sometimes. So just make it as easy as possible. But it's a daily or multiple times per day practice most of the time.
So yeah, the point you make about how the brain changes most effectively is by very small, gentle steps. So you're absolutely right that it's very easy for our brain to, in fact, I was talking about this very recently, given the fact that it's a new year and we often all have new goals. It's very easy for our brain to go to kind of wonderful dopamine-rich fantasies of pleasure and kind of imagine these immediate changes that deliver this incredible emotional experience. And actually, that is something our brain is naturally wired to do. It's wired to encourage us to get on and do better and look for more. And so dopamine is amazing for pushing us on in life. But actually, what can happen is that we fall down because our brain behavior doesn't actually advance that quickly for us to experience such emotional change so quickly. Actually, our brain best adapts to producing our emotions in a different way with small, gentle steps. And it's absolutely amazing what is achievable within a very small amount of time when you work with your brain. But it's very much learning how to, like the vast majority of the work that I do with my clients is about thought intervention, how to intervene with your thought processes, conscious and subconscious, that are so critical to your emotional experience. How do you do that in a way that works with your brain, that is effective, that's sustainable? And so when you say, how do you go about doing that? Is it a daily practice? What I would say is when you're intervening and changing the way that your brain is processing emotion in the general sense initially, Then we have an hour session talking through those concepts, and then 5 minutes a day of embedding that kind of practice and rehearsal. But what is absolutely wonderful about the human brain is that once you've taught neurons to fire together in a certain way, and they've wired themselves together, your brain then naturally defaults to using that and will want to reinforce the pathway that you've already got. It likes to double down on what we already think. So when you said, I realized I had quite a lot of thoughts that I've often kind of been geared towards or been thinking about. That's really natural brain behavior. Our brains want to save mental energy. They're designed to do that for a survival reason. So once we've got a certain way of thinking, our brain is very happy with that. Thank you very much. Whether it serves us emotionally or not, it's not really interested in that. It's just interested in us functioning and our survival. So once we have, that's why curiosity, to go full circle, is such a superpower, because that is, mental flexibility personified, really. How do we support our brain with thinking outside of what has been our previous way of thinking? But this is a relatively long answer to simply saying that once you've done an intervention, yes, there are ways to keep your brain on its A game, processing out its emotions in the best possible way, to have the limited, to limit the challenging emotions you experience, and to maximize the empowering emotions it produces. But in terms of the actual intervention, taking your brain from where it is when it's on automatic mode to where it is when it can give you full emotional opportunity, that's a stage where you are giving it a good 5 to 10 minutes of rehearsal practice a day. But once you've done that, which is a series of weeks, you're then just at a point where you are oiling the cogs and keeping things going as efficiently as possible. So I live and breathe this work. I do 5 minutes a day, what I call daily maintenance, like 5 minutes of daily maintenance. So my brain processes the day. That quite often sometimes includes challenging emotion, because that's what brains do. I can process that out in a way that allows it to process and pass. But underneath, I've got all this wonderful emotional robustness from the intervention that I've done that keeps me centered and grounded and secure. I suppose an example of that really recently would have been that, just in case it's helpful for people to see real life examples, I found a lump in my chest 4 weeks ago. And like you, I'm a massive believer of sharing information and allowing people to kind of understand concepts if they wish to. So first of all, remember, everybody, it's very important to think about our health and to check our bodies. But when I found that lump, that was associated with lots of thoughts my brain already had about things like cancer. And so when I went to the doctor, and the doctor confirmed that I needed to go on the 2-week cancer pathway, my brain had loads of existing thoughts about cancer, and it produced lots of thoughts that went to heightened emotion, mild overwhelm, anxiety, nervousness. In a previous life, I probably would have tried to have avoided that as much as possible, with as many positives as I possibly could have thought of, because as we've said, for me, that's what that looked like, right? I probably wouldn't have spoken to many people about it, because I would have been trying to contain it. And I think I would have felt like I didn't want to concern myself with having to engage with that emotionally. Whereas because my brain is so different now, that circumstance came my way, I was able to process out all the emotion my brain was producing to do with that. A very simple tool that people can take away today is simply externalizing thoughts on a piece of paper is unbelievably useful to access some emotional relief initially. There's plenty more that you can embed and do at a higher skill level, but even just as a frontline skill, it can be incredibly useful simply to write out thoughts in relation to significant emotions you're feeling. But I processed that out, and then I thought, okay, so actually, where do I want to go? Now that I'm lucky enough to have a brain that will respond to me emotionally, what do I want it to produce? How do I want it to perform during this period? Because it was 3 more weeks before I had my call in with the consultant. I'm very lucky to say that this week they confirmed that I'm in a very privileged position, and in my situation, it's non-cancerous. So I feel very lucky, very grateful. There are a lot of people navigating a very different scenario. But I obviously had 3 weeks where I didn't know that was the situation. It would have been very natural and normal to simply have continued to feel anxious, had the ear protectors on, and just tried to numb out those challenging emotions. Whereas I think I would like, if I was choosing, I went around kind of my feelings wheel, which is one of the tools I use for my clients, but essentially is just a list of emotions to choose from. And I thought I would like, if I was choosing, which I am, I would choose to feel peaceful and I would choose to feel accepting during this period while this happens. And so because I have mastered the skills of thought intervention, I was able to reveal the thoughts that my brain was producing that weren't serving me. And again, going back to this gentle approach, I was able to take it through the stages that I needed to change that thought slowly until it changed to one that was able to produce the feeling of peacefulness for me, or the feeling of acceptance. And so it was amazing 3 weeks, because I wasn't pretending to feel peaceful and pretending to feel accepting. I genuinely got to benefit from those sensations in my body, not because I'm a superior person, not because I'm more intelligent. That is utterly irrelevant. It's simply just the opportunity I've been privileged enough to have to understand how I can make my brain emotionally serve me. And that's what is my absolute mission, to make emotional empowerment the new normal, so that people can know what is possible. Whether they want that for themselves or not is none of my business, but just for people to know there is another way to what's emotionally normal at the moment. And they have amazing emotional potential inside their brain.
It's there's two things. One of the first question I have is more of a statement, I guess. But when you were saying all of that, I think oftentimes we try to control our brain, and I don't. So you're obviously best to explain if this is possible. Well, sometimes our brains just go crazy; they just go nuts, and you go, and then I'm just thinking sometimes it's like wrestling a bull in my head. It's just like whoa, 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 like it's just going crazy, 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 and sometimes that conflict, that wrestling in itself becomes something else, and it's just I I felt that if I just let it not go crazy out of control, but just let it, it's like the ball's scared and it's just going okay, and just okay, just let it run out for a few minutes and just not tire itself out, but just go okay, and then you can kind of approach the ball and say okay, you know what's going on, and then like you said, do small steps. Is that an accurate way, or have I misunderstood how we can do that?
No, I think that's a really interesting analogy, actually. I'm with
Mhm.
you with the bull there. I think we've all been there for sure. And there's a difference, isn't there, between the way in which we're experiencing something emotionally and the thoughts that are coming into our consciousness in relation to that. And then there's what we objectively think. So it's almost, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm very comfortable being wrong, but it's almost like you're kind of describing the thoughts that your brain was producing automatically. And then it was almost like you had some external perspective that was seeing that
Yeah.
maybe that was, I don't know, for you, perhaps a little disproportionate, or perhaps a little more intense than you might choose it to be. Something that often an external person might say.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because we have thought processes that our brain is automatically using and producing very quickly. And then we have the prefrontal cortex, which is the bit that allows us to self-regulate and allows us to think about things with more perspective and proportion. When you're in
Okay.
intense emotion, which will usually be directly associated with a period of very intense thinking, that part of the brain is kind of missing in action. It's very, very much less easy to access.
Okay.
So one of the best things that you can do as a kind of immediate skill in that situation, which you've described beautifully with your analogy, would be if you're in intense emotion and you can see that your brain is firing off in lots of ways that aren't serving you, that feel intimidating or intense, one of the best things you can do is support yourself in calming down and processing that emotion, because it will allow your prefrontal, the bit that I would call is Colin, the Colin bit, that helps you self-regulate and rationalize, is able to be used by you again. Then it comes back online because it's not shut off with intensity. And one of the most effective, I think we might have even talked about this, Colin, when we last chatted. Did we talk about deep abdominal breathing?
I
Can't
think so.
remember.
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah,
did.
I'm quite into breath work anyway, so yeah, probably
Right.
it's quite likely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we touched on the fact that's an amazing frontline skill for moments of intensity where we want emotions to process and pass. And because our brain naturally associates deep abdominal breathing with relaxation and safety, we can use that in our benefit. So when we are experiencing a moment of intense emotion, to use your analogy, if it feels like the ball's running all over the place and we've got limited opportunity for influence, actually finding that outlet to bring ourselves down and calm us, whether that's deep abdominal breathing, whether that's removing ourselves from the situation, even though we've said it's not the direct circumstance generating your emotion, but taking yourself out of that situation can be emotionally helpful, in terms of how your brain reacts to that. Seeking a moment outside. They're all small things that we can do that allow the emotional intensity we're feeling to drop. And that's when we can have our best access to the part of our brain that will help us rationalize. But critically, like you said, making sure that we support ourselves with curiosity and compassion, thinking of it almost with a detachment of, I can see my brain is thinking this way at the moment, or I can see my brain is thinking very intensely at the moment. What's a small step I can do to support myself? Because typically we often find it so easy to go to self-criticism in moments when we are experiencing challenging emotion. And we've often absorbed this idea that, successful people somehow don't experience challenging emotion, or that, if we're experiencing challenging emotion or challenging thinking, that must indicate some lacking in us as a person. I was completely convinced that the anxiety I felt, that felt like such an integral part of me, was a total indicator of my inadequacy. I mean, obviously, my brain was looking for inadequacy. We talked about that. But when I started understanding that emotions are physical sensations produced in our body by our brain, it allowed me to see it from a more scientific lens, which took away that kind of self-criticism that can be very unhelpful when things are already feeling intense.
Yeah. So my second question, my brain came up with this thought, so it might be wrong. I don't know whether I should enter into this, in that naivety way, but something said to me, obviously, you got some great news, which is fantastic. Do you think that, so I also come across this thing around our body and just how everything is actually connected. And when I think that our brains go crazy, it creates like this stress response, and our body's like going, okay, whoa. And actually by calming it down can go, okay, and it doesn't, I'm not saying it is the result, that it wasn't cancer, but it helped not push it into being cancerous. And I don't know why my brain says that. Is there any link, or is just my thought process off in some way?
Well, it is true that if you navigate a lot of intense emotion very regularly, there are direct health associations with that in the long term.
Okay.
That emotions themselves aren't a causation of cancer, as in they are two separate concepts. But you are right in the sense that emotions are felt as physical sensations in the body, and that can influence us in lots of physiological ways. And so I would offer that, for example, were my body navigating cancer at that point, had I been experiencing lots of intense emotion, which would have been completely natural and completely normal. So this isn't about suggesting that would be inappropriate or disproportionate. But equally, intense emotions are very draining. They are physical sensations in the body. They can, emotions can energize us and they can deplete us. So had I been navigating lots of nervousness during that period, my body would have been far more drained. So in terms of it repairing and looking after its general health, it would have been disadvantaged. And so I suppose I would offer that, just that we can think of emotions as being very advantageous or disadvantageous for the health in our bodies in general. And so then when your body is put under strain, for example, it's amazing how my clients have stopped having migraines, for example, because actually the anxiety that was fueling those has removed that muscle tension, or for people to suddenly start sleeping in ways that they never did before because their brain isn't feeling it needs to be hyper alert, and actually it's delivering feelings of calm and peacefulness. There are loads of fascinating ways that when we intervene at an emotional level, it radiates out more physiologically. But yeah, for me, I suppose the question I was privileged enough to be able to ask myself, because I've been able to master these skills now, was what are the emotions that would be most advantageous to me right now, and how can I take steps to get there? And I think even if that feels very far away for lots of people who haven't yet had the opportunity to develop these skills, what I would offer is those sorts of questions can still be incredibly powerful just from an initial awareness and curiosity perspective, because questions like what emotions fuel me, what emotions bring a benefit to my life, and would I like to explore how to support myself in enjoying and benefiting from them more often?
Yes.
And I feel like that's not for me to answer, because we're all entitled to have our own opinions about our emotional experience and what is best for us. But it's more about asking those questions in the first place, I think. So we've got some curious insight and opportunity.
Yeah, I think that whole curiosity thing is, I think it's one of those things that almost runs through these conversations that I like to have. And I've said this recently. I don't like to give advice anymore. Not that I don't think I was doing it on any of these episodes, but I think my job here is about being curious enough to ask questions. And if there's someone that's listening to this or watching on the replay or whatever, and they come across that and they might want to try that for themselves. There's no, you have to do this. There is no one way. And I think a lot of people have signed up for outsourcing and sort of they're a bit lost and sort of saying, okay, well, I've got to try it this way. And then they get frustrated. And it's more about saying, look, there's all these tools, tips, tricks, not to necessarily avoid things, but it's to understand, see what's going on, and things that could maybe help you in whatever that you're dealing with. And you talked a moment ago about writing down that initial thing, just writing down and getting something out. There's I'm going to have a live with a lady who's actually created her own journaling, and that's amazing. So there's a lot that overlaps in these ways, and people that struggle to write, they're not happy to do it, they can't find the time, or it just doesn't align with them. There's other things that they can try, but I think bringing the awareness that you don't have to struggle in silence. There are ways to try things. And I've often in my own life recently said about experimenting, and it's not, I think before I used to put a lot of faith in one way is the way for me. And then when it didn't work and it was either a pass or a fail, and that felt strange. But now it's about experimenting and seeing who I am. And oftentimes when you see like gurus trying to sell you on, I can just talk about being successful and building like a multi-million or billion-dollar company, and then they'll say it's easy, just do this. I've signed up for it, don't get me wrong, no judgment, that's me. But I realize it's about understanding who you are, how you show up, what you actually want. And none of those people are designed, they're going forward, they're going full steam ahead, and they think it's useful to show you the way that works for them. But I think in all of these things, it comes down to taking time, non-judgmentally looking and just sort of being curious about who you are, your situations, etc. Trying to get past any excuses you might be telling yourself. Again, hands up, that was me. And just exploring these things, because I think just in the way that you explain things, just that story alone, I think oftentimes we don't know how to process it, and we're not taught, especially around emotions at school, upbringing, we're all almost told to ignore what our emotions are. So when it comes to that, we don't talk about it, or we feel maybe ashamed to talk about it. So the way that you expressed it, and actually taking us through the steps that you did, I think that's super helpful. And I hope people get a chance to listen to that and understand, there's another way. And I think talking about it openly allows other people to feel there's no shame in it. These are the things, these are the steps that can potentially work. And I think that's an amazing thing to start with: curiosity and non-judgment, and then see where you go from there.
Yeah, I really agree with everything you've said, Colin. The thing that really stands out for me was that your reference to emotional language. Before I'd looked into neuroscience and done any of this, if you'd asked me, was I quite emotionally literate, I probably would have said, yes, yeah, well, I'm sure I am. Because I'd just come out of classrooms with lots of children with high behavioural emotional needs, and I felt like, I probably knew quite a lot. Oh my goodness, there was so little that I'd had the opportunity to think about in terms of myself. And actually, one of the first things I realised is that I'd never practiced the delicacy of language. So my first step, and as you were saying, with the curiosity and the awareness, the first step, and I always say this to all my clients as well, is building up an insightful picture of your emotional now, but with insight and skill. Because I realized that I was almost the equivalent of going to the doctor and saying, I don't feel great, and then him or her saying, okay, so tell me more about that. And I just didn't have the words. It was almost like I couldn't describe it. And I didn't have many emotional terms in my head either, because again, we simply hadn't had this as part of our education. In fact, I've got this, in case we talked about this, I've brought these. So these are feelings flashcards, which I use for my girls. And they're great for when they're, in our family, we call it inner feeling. So if you're in a feeling and you just find it difficult to get the words out, I give them the cards, and they decide out which of the cards they're feeling, and they put them out. So it's a way of encouraging emotional communication and in education for them in terms of being able to work out how they might be feeling. But I was looking at these cards and I was thinking they're amazing because they've got a brilliant picture for them. So obviously sadness doesn't feel great, but they are useful pictures. Frightened is just a little mouse and a cat. And I was thinking, actually, as an adult, I don't think I'd got much further than that. I mean, I just don't think I'd had the opportunity to develop the language. And critically, yes, it's important to explain our emotional experience to other people sometimes, but I realized actually, if my brain is producing my entire emotional experience, I'm the person that needs the greatest insight emotionally into what my experience is now, because we are, as you said, beautiful individuals, all of us. We're all unique, and that's incredible and wonderful. And our emotional experience is unique as well. And I realized that before I even got to a place of thinking what next steps might look like for where I wanted to go, I first needed to understand with awareness and clarity what was it that was my emotional now. And there are some fantastic tools. Even if people listening to this just Google the late Gloria Wilcox, who was a psychologist in the 70s, she created a tool called the Feelings Wheel, which I think I referenced earlier. I've actually created my own personal one for my clients and the kind of typical emotions that they experience day to day. And anyone's welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn if they'd like a copy. But even if they just Google the Emotional Feelings Wheel or any emotional resource that has the names of different emotions, that's not me trying to patronize anybody. It's literally just a fantastic way in to understanding your experience with greater clarity and perspective and insight, that actually is essentially the first step to deciding whether it's actually in your interest, or whether it's something you would like to pursue to change your experience once you can see what it is with real insight.
Yeah, it's I think I don't know if I mentioned this before. So my childhood was very. There was not a lot of emotions in our house. That sounds horrible and like barren, almost like a Adam's family sort of thing. But it wasn't that. It was just that it was my. I think my even as an adult, I've struggled, and so basically it's happy or sad. No, happy, sad,
Yeah,
or angry, and those
yeah, yeah.
only those three can exist. But so I've seen that the wheel of emotions. You call it
Mm-hmm,
wheel of
mm-hmm.
emotion, and so there's the inner circle and the outer circle, right? Is that
Yeah,
that's
there
how?
are various versions of them, but yeah, they do typically have that. Yeah.
But I saw this a few years ago, and it blew my mind, and I'm like, what? And they're not words that I hadn't heard of. I just they didn't enter into my world, and I was like, oh, and then the association between those, and it's like, oh, okay, and it's like I don't know, if you want to go to the gym and you want to lift heavy weights, you kind of need to go to the gym and lift small weights, and that small weights is understanding maybe terminology and stuff like that, and it's not. It can be actually very fun to look at those emotions and what they are, and just again, don't beat yourself up about it. Just look at it and go, oh, like from a fascination point of view, and you go, okay, linked to this type of emotion, there's like sub emotions, and you go, oh, okay, and it's I love the way that you explained that. If you go to the doctors and you go and they say, well, how are you feeling? It's quite something if you just go, I'm feeling sad, and they go, oh, okay. And I'm not saying this is exactly what they would do, but they might go, oh, well, there's a pill for that, and you go, no, 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 actually, it's a miscommunication. It's not sad. It's this other variant of something that looks like sad, and it's amazing. And as I'm talking, have you watched the Pixar movie Inside Out?
I
You
was
seen
I was
that?
going to finish your sentence
Oh,
then, and I
no.
thought that would be rude, but yeah, Inside Out for
I
sure.
so for any adult, don't even worry if you've got kids or not. Go and watch this. And
Couldn't
there's a second
agree
one, which
more.
is honestly, it's just like, wow, I wish I'd have had that. Just because it's this playful side of it, and you can laugh at things, and it's just,
Yeah,
but also I think it's what's really nice about it for me is that I think I'd always thought of things like sadness as a thing that was a negative thing and I didn't want. And I
okay.
would kind of do something. I go, oh, I'm feeling sad, so that's not good. Actually, you need all of these things together. You need the sadness, you need the happy, and there you go. I was struggling to think of any emotion, but no,
Well, they still are valid terms, Colin. Valid
yeah,
terms.
I know. I was just thinking, who else is there? And it's like, but it's just how they sharp, and it's um, and I was watching. I was actually watching it with my kids, and I was like, this is genius, and it's done in such a beautiful way that you don't feel silly as an adult to watch it. You feel
Yeah,
really enlightening, and you're like, oh yes,
it's
and
beautifully done, isn't it?
yeah, really. But
Yeah.
it's. I was talking to my girlfriend about it, and I said, "Oh, they must have spoken to quite a few psychologists, emotional teachers, and understand all this, because the way that they've weaved it, like the brain and stuff like that, and I'm quite a visual person, so it's really
Mm,
interesting because they go through these areas and stuff like that, and it's like just it's such a great film. Well, both of
yes.
them are really, really great, and it's just and I think, oh, I know maybe my kids don't quite get it yet. They're quite young, but if that enters into a world where they start to have an awareness of that, and it's almost subconsciously, because it's a movie, it's just something fun, but they can relate to it. Something sitting there and they can reference, and that will help them, when they're explaining to me, okay, I'm feeling this, and you go, oh, okay, and then they've got that range, that vocabulary, to be able to explain it to me. And I think in a lot of these conversations that I've had, I think awareness of yourself is so great for you, amazing, and I think it's the place to start. I think loving yourself is something that I've really worked on, and I've been doing it for about a month, maybe 6 weeks. Really changed how rather than chase, it was internal. But once you understand, and it's not that you have to master every single bit of you, but once you get that awareness of you, you can share that with the people around you. Your relationships get better. And I've seen this, people might find this woo-woo, and I say woo-woo because anything that we can't necessarily explain, we put as woo-woo to protect ourselves from feeling like we're a bit silly. But when you can understand yourself and you go, oh, what's serving me, what's not, and okay, and I need to just alter that. And life isn't about, okay, again, we're going to change overnight. It can be a gentle tweak into something, a response to something, maybe setting a smallest boundary or evolving slowly. It doesn't come really, really quickly, and it shouldn't. Well, it shouldn't. Again, shouldn't say it shouldn't. But I think what ends up happening once you put this focus on yourself and awareness, the outside world mirrors you. Like, things show up, things are easier because you're not beating yourself up, you're not chasing, you're not coming from a place of lack or anything like that. And when you understand yourself, you can explain to other people. So it's a long sentence, wording, whatever you want to say, but ultimately, a lot of this stuff, people say, it's selfish to think about ourselves or to put ourselves first. But I like to reframe that and say, no, because actually the effort or the time that you can put into understanding yourself will help so many other people in the similar but different way that you've done it. You've understood yourself and you've done the research. You've gone through it. And I'm sure you help all your clients, etc. But I'm sure your relationship with your husband and your kids is different.
Oh, it's saved my marriage. It's transformed my experience as a parent, and I think that idea about it being selfish is really interesting, isn't it? Because I would offer that selfishness is almost the idea that we are taking away from somebody else as a result of something that we are doing. Whereas what I would offer is, when our emotional experience supports and empowers us, we have so much more emotional capacity for those around us. And so what I would offer is, it is a win all round. And for me, that's why emotional empowerment is just as much about social impact as it is about the individual. What I've found is, for me and my clients, as we've changed our experience, we've got more patience for other people, more tolerance, more adaptability, more love, more kindness, rather than less. And I think when we are emotionally topped up, we can be our best version of ourselves for other people.
Amazing. And do you know what? I have so many other questions, but I want to just end it on that, because I don't think I could find a better place to end all of that. There feels like there's around 3 in there for me and all these questions. But for today, I think we covered so much, and I'm so grateful for you. And again, there's stuff that I didn't understand, and I'm really grateful for you showing up for me and explaining these things, and I love it. And if people get half of what I've got out of this, then they're going to have a rich day of understanding things, and maybe an idea to take things forward. So I always say, obviously, people watching this will want to reach out to you. Where should they find you? Your LinkedIn, where I found you? or
Yeah,
website? Where's the
sure.
best?
So
Where's the
I'm
best place?
only on LinkedIn in terms of social media. So yeah, people can find me on LinkedIn. If they'd like to just find out more about what I do, maybe access some free support, then I'm coachingillumination.com, and I provide free email support each week. So if people are interested in kind of dipping their toes in, they can start taking steps forward practically themselves. But yeah, that's how they can reach out. And I'm always here from a place of genuine support. So yeah, please reach out if people would like to.
Amazing. So I repost this, and I'll put the links obviously, and that mention you as well, so it's easier for people to find you. It's not that
Thank
difficult,
you.
but remove any friction. So yeah. But for today, thank you again for showing up. Thank you for opening up my mind, and yeah, I love it. I've gained a lot. So thank you very much, Sally.
Oh, absolute privilege. I feel like we learn something from everyone, don't we? And it's
Yeah,
just as much of a privilege for me to connect with you. So thank you so much.
lovely, fantastic. Thanks, Sally. Take care.
No worries. Bye.